Okay, today we're going to talk about radios, mounting in the Jeep, and what and why I use what I use. Something I do have a little bit of experience with. I've been a ham operator for a long time, a couple of decades, and kind of messing with radios pretty much since I was a kid. Okay, now mounting in a Jeep can be somewhat difficult because of the limited options on that. And what you see here is this bar system that I got that just comes off my my roll bar, my safety cage, and I got that from Arizona Rocky Road is the name of the website, and he makes various accessories for Jeeps to include this bar and some radio mounts or antenna mounts we're going to be taking a look at. And it just basically hooks over the top of the roll bar there. You do have to drill a couple of holes. Came with all the hardware and instructions, and it's real easy to mount. Definitely gets the job done. Okay, this unit is a Yaesu FT7900. It's a 2 meter and a 70 centimeter ham radio. And also with a little bit of work you can get it to where it talks to various walkie-talkies. I've got it mounted basically overhead on top of the bar. A little difficult to see from up there, but once you get used to it, you kind of know what it does and where it needs to be set. Works real good on talking to the handy talkies outside of the Jeep on the trail. But the main thing about this is I can find out where the local repeaters are in the area in which I'm off-roading, especially if I'm going to do an overland type trip. I program those repeaters in there with my computer, and then I can pretty much get one of those repeaters from basically anywhere that I am at any time. And if you need to call for help, you can do that. Okay. Usually there's a ham listening to those repeaters, and they'll make a phone call for you. So that's the benefit of having that. It's got multiple uses, but mainly it's a good safety device to get you out of trouble. Get broke down or stranded, or who knows what can happen out on these trails, but the ham radio comes in handy for that. Okay, this one here is a Maxlog M8900. It covers 10 meters, 11 meters, and 12 meters. And it's 30 watts. Now 11 meters is your CB band. 10 and 12 meters are ham bands. And there's a bunch of other space in between there. There are some legal issues on where you operate and what radio you use to operate where. But in an emergency, you know, we do what we got to do. The Maxlog is good because, you know, I basically use it more as a CB radio. And I get the, you know, the trucker channel, and if you've got other people in your Jeep club that have CB radios, they're good to keep in contact with while you're going down the trail, or if you're doing rock climbing, you can talk from one Jeep to the other and so forth. But between the two radios, I've got 5 bands. Now on the 10, 11, and 12 meter rig that you see here, it gets real noisy in the daytime. A lot of static. A lot of skip rolling in at times. That's people from other states. Now, since I am a ham operator, if I needed to, I could get on 10 meters, and I could probably call somebody somewhere during the day that would hear me, and they would probably make a phone call for me. Hams are that way. They don't mind helping out. Same way with on the 11 meter of the CB band. If you get on the trucker channel, channel 19, and as long as there's a place where you can get out, get your transmission back to highway, normally somebody will hear you. A little bit harder to get one of them to do anything for you, but in an emergency, I'm sure one of them would make a phone call for you. Call the sheriff or police department, wherever you're stranded, and try to get you some help. But that just kind of gives you a look on the interior of how I've got my little communications system set up here. I also use that bar. As you can see, I've got my light control panel, and I've got an interior LED light in there as well. Give me a little bit more visibility on the inside. But one thing I do like about the Maxlog, the HF radio, is the size. It's smaller, and it doesn't block my mirror like some of the larger radios sold here in the States. And the reason I say sold in the States is because I had to order this from overseas. This radio actually isn't made anymore. And I ordered it because of its size and because of its power. It's 30 watts. I did have some issues with it, and I had to send it off and have a lot of the solder joints cleaned and resoldered, which is pretty common these days with these Chinese-made radios. They're just not made near as good as what they are. And in the Jeep here, they do take some abuse, moving around, getting knocked around with a lot of shock and a lot of movement, and the solder joints don't hold up so well. But that's an easy fix for a good radio technician. But anyway, just an overview of the interior layout. So now let's go take a look at antennas on the outside. Okay, so I run several options for antennas. You see the small, thin, silver wire antenna on the left. That's my UHF and VHF antenna. And you can see how it extends over the top of the cab. And I will tell you that that one does hit my garage door, but because it is so flexible, it just bends and it doesn't really cause me any issues and so forth. But if it were more of a rigid antenna, that would be a problem in the garage. Okay, so mounted next to it, I have a 2-foot Firestik antenna, and that enters the garage and it does clear the garage door. Okay, you can see it's very rigid, so it would easily break if it were to not clear the garage door. And I'll get into the mounting here in just a minute. But I run that when I'm running around town. Main reason so I can get in and out of my garage. They're good on the trail also because they're not up into the trees so much to where you're snapping them and abusing them. The drawback is they only transmit short range. And by short range, I mean once you get on a trail, you're lucky to get a 1/4 mile. That can be a good thing because it's not a bad idea to keep your signal confined when you're talking to vehicles that are within line of sight. But the other side of that is if you need to call for help, you're going to have a tough time doing it with that particular antenna. Okay, now we're looking at the mounting. Okay, and I got these mounts once again from the same place I got my radio bar that's inside the Jeep, from Arizona Rocky Road. Okay, and this is how it comes. It's basically just a little piece of square tubing, and it mounts to your spare tire. Okay, your spare tire attachments down here, and it's cut for the antenna, and it even comes with the mounting stud, the antenna stud, and so forth. So it's a very good piece of equipment. On my HF, my CB antenna, you can see that I had to cut it to bring it down to lower the height of the antenna. Okay, because I have broken one of these before, holding the antenna real high. It hits a tree, and I've even snapped this after time. So this one I cut it down low, specifically 2 reasons: so I can get my antenna to clear the garage, this little 2-footer, and also you have to tune these antennas. Okay, you have to check the SWR, the standing wave ratios of them. They have to be tuned to the frequencies on which you're going to talk. And when you put a long base on a high frequency antenna such as this, it's going to cause you some excess tuning to get it to match. Okay, so by cutting that down, that does help. All right, so the antenna's matched a little bit better with less tuning. But I do have it tuned to the frequencies that I use. If you don't do that and you talk a lot on it, you can cause issues. You can damage your radio, actually. It does hinder performance, but it can also damage your radio. Okay, this is an SWR meter. This is what's needed to tune the antennas. I've got a couple of these, so if anybody ever needs help, just give me a holler. And what you have to do is maybe do a little cutting or extending of the antenna to get it to match the frequency in which you talk. And this meter is what puts you in range to do that. But you don't want to use that radio until you tune it properly, because like I said, you do risk not only just weak performance, but you can damage the radio. Okay, this is a secondary mount I have on my spare tire bumper, my spare tire rack. And what I've got on here now is a 3-footer. That's a 3-foot Firestik antenna. Okay, and it grounds really, really well on that bumper rack. Okay, so when I'm traveling and on the highway and so forth, I want to have a little bit more range. I want to be able to hear the highway reports and so forth. So I usually put that 3-foot on there, and it actually does pretty good for the trail also. It's a little bit more flexible. I'll take the 2-footer off and just put it in the back of the Jeep. I got a place where over the top of the roll bar where I bungee those down. But I'll put that 3-footer on there, and that enhances, with that mount the way that it is, that enhances the reception, enhances the transmit. You wouldn't want to get in a bunch of low trees with that, but for traveling on the highway and so forth, and it's still not too high where you can't go through drive-through windows and, you know, pick you up something to eat and those types of things. So I go to the 3-foot Firestik, and then once again, it's checked and tuned, but I use that when I'm traveling on the highway, and a lot of times I do use it for trail use as well. Okay, so now we're looking at the 5-footer. It's a top-loaded. This antenna is made by Serio. Okay, it's an Italian company. It is a little bit more costly of an antenna. Okay, but now I'm getting in a situation where I need to call for help. I keep this inside the Jeep, and it's bungee down on top of the roll bars. And, you know, with antenna, you know, height is everything. So if you get a taller, more potent antenna like that, you're going to get a lot more distance. That antenna will also cover all of 11 meters and all of 10 meters. It's very, very broad banded. And, I mean, if I want to just talk for, you know, just for enjoyment, I hear the band is open and I want to make a contact in another state or something, with that antenna I can usually get out. So especially if you're up in high grounds, you're up in the mountain or something like that, you're going to be able to find somebody that can hear you if you've got a well-grounded, well-tuned antenna of that size. But then again, you can see for the trail it's not that great, because it's, first of all, it's going to flex a lot, it's going to sway a lot from side to side. That puts a lot of stress on the antenna, and you can damage it from doing that. And if you get into any trees, it's going to get snapped. So I keep that one on top of the roll bar, and there it stays until I need it. And if I want to use it either for hobby reasons, or if there's some kind of an emergency and I need to call from help, that antenna will get the job done. Okay, and lastly, I have the 7-foot Firestik, and this thing is a beast. So I'm going to back up just so you can kind of see the size of this. Once again, it's mounted to my spare tire rack right there for good ground, and you can just see that that thing just towers above the Jeep. Definitely not something for rough terrain. I have used it going down the highway, and it does hold. Okay, you can see it's mounted very, very sturdy there. But as I close my tailgate, okay, give you a perspective from there. Now, something to keep in mind is this is going to be directional, more or less in the direction that the Jeep is pointed, because the Jeep uses the antenna uses the Jeep for its ground. So if my Jeep is pointed forward, more of my signal is going to be reflected to the front because it reflects off of the Jeep, for lack of a better way of explaining it. And the weaker signal and reception is going to be to the rear. So if I needed to call for help or just talk to somebody that was a long ways away, it would help if I pointed my Jeep towards them. And this is something I experimented with extensively, and with the results to say what I'm saying is true. That'd be the opposite if you had it mounted on the front bumper. Your stronger reception and transmission would be towards the rear of the Jeep, because the Jeep is basically behind the antenna. So it's basically going to reflect off the Jeep or utilize the counterpoise of the Jeep in the direction where there's more metal pointed towards whatever your target is. Okay, so that's the 7-foot. Once again, I can slide that over the top of the roll bars. It barely fits in there, but it's very, very broad banded. All of 11 meters, all of 10 meters is covered with this antenna after I have tuned it, and all the frequencies in between. So I can use it to talk long distance, atmospheric skip, people in other states, or if I need to call for help, get on top of a hill if possible, and I can probably hit a highway somewhere nearby, and at least on the trucker channel, see if you can get one of those guys to make a phone call for you if that's the worst case scenario. Good thing about it is you may not have phone service on the trail, but with these radios you can generally get out, and also it's a good way just to keep in communication from Jeep to Jeep. Just remember, you tune it, be smart about what you select and how you mount it. It's got to be well grounded, and so forth. And if anybody needs any help or has any questions, just holler at me and I'll do what I can.